A very warm welcome, and we're back with these conversations talking about, of course, simply Suparnaa. Conversations have always been about leaders, and now we're specifically focusing on leaders who are making a social impact. I have a very, very special guest, but before I introduce her to you, as is customary, I would like to start by paying obeisance to the higher power. For me, the higher power is Shakti. That's how I refer to her. And I'm going to be reciting a very old Sanskrit verse, the Saraswati Vandana. Essentially, the meaning of that is to help us dispel the darkness that resides in our hearts and illuminate it with the knowledge of wisdom. या कुंदेन्दु तुषारहार धवला या शुभ्र वस्त्रावृता या वीणावर दंड मंडित करा या श्वेत पद्मासना या ब्रह्मचित्त शंकर प्रभूति भी देवै सदा वंदिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निशेष जाड्यपहा. And without much further ado, let me add to the stream my very special guest, Sangeeta Robinson, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of PVR Limited. And who would have imagined that an entertainment company will be sustainably viable in terms of being accessible? And I think it has more to do with the ethos of the company more than any mandates that any government can levy. We'll get to that. We'll get to talking about how proactive the company has been in terms of, even much before there was a mandate by the government, they were becoming more accessible, more friendly to people with disabilities. But before that, we want to get to know more about Sangeeta Robinson, who's the person driving this whole change in the entertainment industry, and not just by making cinema halls more accessible for persons with disability, but also the content to be more accessible. Thank you so much for doing this for us, Sangeeta. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely honored, Suparna, and very happy to be here.
Yeah, so before we get on with what you actually do at PVR, and that is, of course, something very, very unique, very interesting, and very much so that it forms as an example for the rest of the world to emulate. But I would like to know you as a person, what because whenever I've met you, you've come across as an extremely passionate person, somebody who really believes in what she is doing. And I feel change happens only when there are individuals who are so driven purely by passion and not contrary to the belief that people say that money and material aspects etc kind of help change or bring about that change. But I feel it's the intent and the passion that the person brings to the table that actually can affect that kind of an impact that we are looking at. So let's start with you, Sangeeta. I'm not sure everybody knows this, but let's hear your story, how you started out and what your journey has been.
Sure. So, for those of the audience that don't know me, I was born with a 17 and a half inch shortening of the femur, of my left femur. And I wear an extension prosthesis, which is an artificial leg, right from childhood. And the only and I've been brought up to forget about the disability and focus on everything else but the disability, and that's how my parents kind of designed everything around me. So I went to a regular school, and I jumped and I danced and I did just about everything, including break my caliper multiple times, for which we lived in a very small little town in Himachal, and there weren't very many facilities. So my father became part mechanic, and half the time he was fixing it himself. The other half he found people who would be there and put it together so that I could walk again. And basically what I'm trying to drive home was that I was brought up not to think of the disability at all and focus on everything else but the disability. So I was a fairly good student, and I was into dramatics and extracurricular and everything. And when I went into college, so incidentally, I never had a certificate till I started working. And the reason I had a disability certificate was so that I could get the income tax rebate. So I went to a regular college, had a decent percentage, sailed through admissions, government college for girls, Chandigarh. Um, was in the Giddar group, by the way, uh, and so I did my masters in mass comm from Punjab University, and then was went into moved into corporate communications, and I've led Corpcom for some of the best companies in the world, in the country. Sorry, in the country, and
Well, some of the best
in the world.
workplaces are in the country, so it's okay. It can be in the world
So,
as well.
yeah, so I was with the Tata Group, with IBM, Cummins, and then um, I
Okay,
moved
so
in.
before we get to you coming to PVR, what I'm trying to establish here is that you were born with a congenital defect of your femur being 17 and a half inches shorter in between both the legs. And that 17 and a half is a good, 1.5 foot between the two.
Yeah,
But you never actually felt that you are disabled, or actually you were never made to feel that you were lesser in any kind of way, thanks to the environment and thanks to the upbringing your parents kind of designed for you consciously, so that you do not have that in your mind. And also the schools and colleges, etc., wherever you sailed through life, you never used disability to your advantage, so to speak, saying that I'm disabled, so I should have access to this, or I'm disabled, so I should have access to a quota XYZ, which never happened.
never.
And a lot of it has to do with the kind of upbringing that you've had.
Absolutely,
And then
absolutely.
till the time you joined corporate world, that's the time one of the gentlemen kind of advised you that while the calipers that you wear, to normalize your walk, is not covered by insurance, and just so that you can actually buy that, or at least have the costs covered for it, you can get an income tax rebate which you will use there. Is that what it is, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So this is a beautiful story, because a lot of times what happens is that we are always looking at our own selves with pity, our own selves with that we are short, or we do not have, or we've been shortchanged, and things like that. And it is just not from a physical perspective. I think human beings are such that they would love to indulge in self pity, irrespective wherever they are, whatever they're doing. So here is Sangeeta Robinson, who has had this congenital deformity, but she has never actually indulged in that self pity of, I'm lesser than anyone. On the contrary, she's making waves of trying to make a change. And that change essentially started to happen when she joined PVR Limited, right? So, what was your journey from
Yeah.
PVR?
So basically, like I established in the earlier part of this interaction, is that so it was all about me. It was all about my career, my education, my personal life, this, that, and the other. And I was doing fairly well in the corporate space, and while at the Tata Group, I also started getting more interested in sustainability, and then started my own consulting firm.
But
This
tell
was in
me, nobody around you made you feel any less, because a lot of times it's the other person who actually, kind of project their emotions onto you.
that happens when you okay. This is a very funny, very little anecdotal. So when I got married to a colleague of mine at the Indian Express,
So you had
and
like a full blown love affair and all of that
oh, don't
happened.
ask. Don't ask. I mean, no, not one. So, anyways, so when we got married, I took a maternity leave 5 months into my pregnancy, my first pregnancy, and Antara Dev Sen, Amrita's daughter from the first wife, was Abel's colleague, my husband's colleague, and she just asked him. She says, "I haven't seen Sangeeta around. Where is she?" He said, oh well, she took she's on maternity leave. She said, isn't it a little early? He says, because of her leg problem. And she went, what problem? So the point is, your disability is as much as you portray it to the other person. How much of it do you wear on your sleeve is. And I'm not saying it's not possible for everybody to be able to carry it off probably the way I carried it off, because there are certain disabilities that are a lot more severe, a lot more visible, a lot more right there in your face, which is something that is thing. But what I'm trying to say is, when it's a when it's something that, and I, when I was growing up, my mother always dressed me in clothes that concealed as much. And then she probably came from an older school of thought. People have different kind of look, etc., etc. So she would make me wear long skirts and this and that, and so that you didn't actually, although the West looks at it differently, people in the West would expose the entire limb and have nothing and no issues about it, but people in India stare. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, because I never considered it a disability, I think I was able to get away with others not considering it a disability.
Considering it or projecting their own emotions to it, you know.
At all my
Okay.
interviews, and nowadays, in the last 5 or 6 jobs that I've four job 3 or 4 jobs that I've had, I've been headhunted, which means that the LinkedIn profile or whatever, till I've walked into the interview room, nobody has known that I have a disability.
So you've never used this as, and I'm saying use this consciously, as maybe to have a certain edge or an advantage because of either a quota
It's
or
been the other way around. In fact, my friend and roommate in college. I mean, her father was in the army, and he used to always keep cribbing about how lazy she was, and he kept saying, "Look at Sangeeta, look at Sangeeta, how active she is." So it's actually been the other way around. I've kind of overcompensated for my disability. I've
no, no.
done more than most people do, at home, at work. In fact, this takes me back to one of my earlier jobs. Just initially when I just come to Delhi, and it was difficult to. So I landed up at a placement consultancy. And those days, apart from ABC or MAM, this was probably the only other one. It was called A to Z Geta Mall. It was in Defense Colony, and there was a Sardarji running it. And uh, one of my colleagues came and said, apparently there was some internal politics and all that playing out. And he said that, I was just, we used to shortlisting resumes, etc., etc. So while doing that, I had just sat back, and he walked into the room, and he goes and says, just because Sangeeta has a disability, that she thinks she doesn't need to work. So uh, that day I vowed, I said, the day I leave, he's going to ask me to stay back. And right enough, his right hand had left and all that. And besides point, that's another story for another day. But he actually offered me what Indian Express offer was, because I made myself so indispensable to the organization. So basically, my that day I vowed. I said, nobody will ever, even if it is politically motivated or whatever, at least can't say that I'm using my disability for
Correct. And
you
on
know
the contrary, uh, our conversation yesterday revealed that there are people who are bogged down by their own mindsets about the fact that they are disabled. And that kind of was very evident in one of the interviews that you conducted at PVR. Tell us a little bit about that.
which was quite a shocker, because when I saw the CV, it showed that the person was a master's in mass communication from Banaras Hindu University. As qualified as I was, probably from a university that was ranked better than mine. I come from the Punjab University. I mean, people would have different opinions, but yeah, an equally reputable university, if not less. So, and this boy walks in, and he has a slight limp. And I asked him to tell me about himself, and he says, I have this disability. So I said, no, I don't want to know about your disability. I want to know about you, your education and your career, etc. And again, within 3 or 4 sentences after he tells me about his qualifications, etc., he still comes back and says, "Oh, you see, I was working in XYZ and I had to leave because of my disability." So I said, what is your disability? He says, "One leg is 2 inches shorter." So I told him, I said, "Listen, mine is 17 and a half inch shorter. It didn't register." He continued talking, and I had to stop him, and I told him, I said, "I don't think you heard me. I told you that I have 17 and a half inch shortening." And he turns around and says, "Kya bol, ma'am, kya baat kar rahe ho?" So I walked across. I actually walked across and I showed it to him. So basically, something someone said many years ago. Colonel Vora runs a prosthetic center in Zirakpur, and he once said that the handicap is here, not in your arm or your leg or whatever. And that's a fact, because it's how disabled you feel up here that makes all the difference, because two
Yeah.
inches I mean 2 inches, you can lose 2 inches of a limb, even if you have a multiple fracture and the bone is reset. 2 inches is nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. So our own minds bog us down more than anything else, more than the actual disability itself. Okay. So
Absolutely.
now with PVR, now how did this happen? I know that PVR became an accessible cinema much before it was mandated by any government in terms of sustainability and the sustainability reports that needed to be kind of filed. So how did that come about?
So I was headhunted by PVR HR. I think on the basis of the DEI work I'd done in the past in the Tata Group and IBM. And But that was all, not mostly, it was all on the employee or the outsourced side, the outsourced agencies and the employee side. I had done nothing at all on the customer side. In fact, let me also emphasize that there's barely any company in the country that has looked at customer segments, disability with a disability lens. So,
Okay.
so what had started happening in PVR was that the first thing was I think the first time that they realized the management, Mr. Bijli has an elderly mother, and they had moved to their house in Basant Kunj, which was at various levels, and they she was having trouble with the steps. So they bought something called a step climber for the home. And then they thought that maybe they need these for the cinemas as well, because the cinema theater, by nature of the nature of the business, is not at one level, cannot be at one level. So they bought 37 of these for the cinema as well. Of course, these catered to people with limited mobility, not people with total immobility. So somebody who's totally paraplegic or quadriplegic, those machines were actually useless for them. Nevertheless, they did aid people with limited mobility who had the ability to be able to get up from the wheelchair and sit on those. Uh, Also, what happened? 2016 is when the RPWD Act was notified. However, till late 2017, there wasn't much traction on implementation. Before I joined, which was in February 2018, and I was hired primarily to drive this agenda, both internally and externally.
Okay.
Uh, we had a few cinemas like Logix and Mall of India and Plaza, which were accessible, uh, and uh, and that was
So
it.
when you say these cinemas were accessible, what do you mean by that?
So they were, you could come on a wheelchair, get into the Audi, find a seat in a row that you did not have to be lifted into any such thing, and be able to seamlessly go out without having to be carried over any step or anything like that.
So that's like
How
a basic level of accessibility, is what you're saying to begin with. that was there?
Well, so basically, the limitation in Plaza and Rivoli, for instance, was that they did not have washrooms which were wheelchair friendly, and we still don't, because these are heritage properties, and we cannot break down walls, and because a wheelchair friendly cinema has to have a certain dimension, and so we really can't touch these cinemas except do the interiors. So those will remain as is, but all new cinemas have wheelchair friendly toilets in them. Um, Apart from that, wherever so either a structure is accessible by design, or we put in equipment that allow for the wheelchair and the person to be safely transported to the desired row. What we've also done is that we have mapped every single cinema, every single auditorium, and named the rows and the seats that are most accessible. So when
Okay,
you
so before we get to that, I just wanted to share this picture that you have shared with me. This is of Siddharth in Mumbai,
Yeah.
who is making use of the accessibility in a cinema hall in Mumbai. Is that correct? And what
Yes.
we
So
see here,
yeah,
hmm,
what he's
yeah,
using is a power track climber, which attaches itself to the wheelchair. It has a track-based mechanism which takes it up or down the steps.
okay.
So a person on a wheelchair just continues to sit in their wheelchair while a cinema person will come, attach this. This is the equipment. It attaches itself at the bottom as well as at the back, grips it securely, and takes it down with the help of
Okay.
the power track.
So what I'm hearing from you is that when it came to people with disability, there are almost negligent amount of companies that have seen their solutions with that lens. Is that what you're saying? So even when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it is almost never that we look at people with disabilities. We will be talking about trans people, we'll be talking about gender biases, we will be talking about a whole lot of other things in this DEI, this broad term. But within this, there is almost negligent amount of companies that focus on people with disability. That's extremely alarming. I mean, what I'm hearing is very, very alarming.
Yeah, so you're right, because when PVR started looking at this area, that we were looking at it from a business responsibility point of view. And as we moved along this journey, we realized that this was a huge untapped segment of customers for whom you just needed to design or create accessible things. For instance, for the hearing impaired, all that we do is we mark subtitled shows. So by marking those subtitled shows, it becomes easy. So what happens is, if a film is subtitled, and if we run all shows with subtitles, there are a whole lot of people who crib about it. So in
Really?
order to be able
I
to,
mean,
oh yes,
looking at the kind of content that we consume on OTT, it's all subtitled.
yeah, but you have the option of turning it off. There are some very avid moviegoers who do not like subtitles at all, because they say they're distracting. In
That's
fact,
very,
I have figures to saying that the subtitle shows that we mark have a lower footfall.
wow. Maybe
Yes.
there needs to be a little more education about it, the reason why we're doing these subtitles. And I think you have been very instrumental in the advocacy of something like this, isn't it?
Yes, so right from 2018, we've been meeting Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, as well as the Ministry of INB. Prakash Javadekar, when he was Minister of INB, we had a couple of meetings with him. In fact, he sent out, there was some communication that went out from him to the Producers Association as well. So while the hearing impaired are still taken care of by the few movies that come with subtitles, visually impaired have nothing at all. So the
Mm.
only films that have got audio described are the ones that have been either done by the NGO Saksham or have been done by this app developer Excel Cinema, Kunal and Deepthi Prasad. There's this amazing app that is able to stream audio described content right onto your phone. So while a lot of American and European cinemas are still using the devices that Sennheiser or Dolby make, we've gone because we realized that there were a lot of other issues that were attached. Number one,
So tell me a little bit more about this app. What does this app do, and what is the solution that is providing to whom?
so it's an app that you just I mean that's available for both Android as well as iOS,
What is it
and
called?
Excel Cinema.
EXL.
No. X as in X the alphabet, L as in the same cinema. So
XL Cinema. Okay.
yeah, so Excel. So as of now, there's some upgrades that are happening to Excel Cinema. So you might not it might be down at this point of time because they are also doing some other developments to it. But prior to COVID, it was being used, and we did about 7 or 8 shows, different films. Sanju. Sholay is there, and Sholay you can still watch on your PC with audio description. Then Andhadhund has been described. So and now, recently, in fact, somebody had filed a petition. There was a petition in the High Court, and the petitioner won that petition. And Pathan, the court has ordered the makers of Pathan to audio describe Pathan before, I think, May 24th or something like that.
So
So,
how
so
does
basically,
a regular person have access? Somebody who is, say, for example, I know for a fact that I've been closely watching, uh, you know, um, um, Deaf Cricket Society doing what they're doing, and Roma Balwani is doing an excellent job. And maybe in one of the future editions, we'll interview her also. I've also been to, I organized a menstrual hygiene uh, workshop and distributed cloth pads to Noida Deaf Society, in the neighborhood. So how do they access? How do they know? How do they have the information on this particular movie is something that we can go and enjoy? So if we were to dispel that information, how do we do that?
all the booking platforms, be it the PVR app or the PVR website or Book My Show or Paytm, would have has this information that is there. So along with the film, first of all, uh, if you start booking a ticket, and you would be able to see along with the cinema, you will see a wheelchair friendly sign. Now, if
Okay.
if you're a deaf person, then you go to the film and you are able to see shows with the subtitle sign, which will indicate which show is playing with subtitles. You click on that and you can book your ticket in that particular show.
Okay. Okay.
Uh,
So
uh,
basically, while you're booking through these apps, there are symbols and there are cinema halls
yeah,
that are accessible, so that you'll see that these are wheelchair friendly, and then where there are subtitles for hearing impaired. But we are still yet to get there as far as visually impaired are concerned.
yeah, and recently, in fact, I'd like to use this opportunity to be able to clarify one thing because recently I've been getting lots of queries on LinkedIn. So what happens is that on the face of it, so I'm actually creating a distinction because there are cinemas that are accessible, and then there are cinemas that are accessible with assistive equipment. We are creating different icons for the ones that are accessible with assistive equipment, because there's a slight confusion there, because people see the steps and then they say, oh well, it's not accessible. Yes, even if there are steps, we are trying to make sure that you don't have any difficulty going and watching a film, because we've invested a lot in getting these power track climbers, and they are fabulous machines which are used all over Europe, in tourist sites and in other places, and they're exceptionally the ease of operation is great. Our people are completely trained to operate them and take care of
I'm
you.
so glad that you're asking. So you're clarifying all of this. So essentially, the first, of course, is that you are booking through an app. You know that this is accessible or this is hearing impaired friendly through the icons that are there. And then once you have booked it, once you reach the cinema hall, in case you need to have access to the equipment there to help them reach their seats. So people are trained and equipped to take them to their seats, or the seats are specifically which are wheelchair accessible,
Yeah,
right? So I think this is very important because at one point in time I had also volunteered with another organization called Isha, which is working with
mhm.
people with visual disability, and Nidhi Arora was there with me last on the last interaction that we had, and she was doing a lot of audits of offices, accessibility audits of maybe even public places, and I think even when architects or designers are or structural engineers are designing these places, somehow the other it seems that the people with disabilities are completely overlooked. And for us also, with all our faculties in place, we never give it a thought till the time you're actually posed with something like what Mr. Bijli was posed with, and he proactively actually introduced that into the cinema halls. I think that is also extremely essential, not just on cinema halls, but maybe even archaeological buildings if somebody wants to access that. Maybe even to the voting booths if they want to access. There are old people, there are people who are not, maybe wheelchair bound. And there are sometimes how I became conscious to this essentially was also once we booked a ticket to go and watch a movie, and my friend had had an accident, and she couldn't walk, she was on crutches, and then when we landed there suddenly realized, oh dear, we booked right on top, and how is she going to climb up those stairs, so literally we requested somebody, and we gave away those seats, and sat where we didn't have to climb up. So it's, I think it is very important, and that's an important role that people like you are contributing in making this or mainstreaming it, and not something that literally we're confining people with disabilities to their homes, and not go out and not live a full life.
So we are also now working with a builder, you see, because in many cases, what we found was that by the time our design people started working on a structure, it was already not accessible because the builder had created the structure. We get the shell, right? PVR doesn't make the shell. So we get there's a building, there's a mall that's coming up, and there's a cinema that's been planned, and it's been planned at in a way that there have to be steps. So now we're working very closely with builders as well to be able to ensure that if not from the front, at least from the back we have access. So if you think of the earlier cinemas, you would realize that after we used to finish films, even some of the even City Walk, for instance, after you finish the film, you come down by the steps. So what we
Correct.
enable is that people on wheelchair then are allowed to come out from the entry.
Right.
However, in
Especially in
both.
big malls, when you have to go up, you may just take the you may take the elevator, but
Yeah,
when you come down, you have to come
but
down.
now we are. If you notice that the newer ones have a lift at the exit as well. So so now what our option is that if the front is a problem, then we will ensure that there's access from the back. If both are a problem for whatever reason, then we ensure that we have assistive equipment there.
So, if we were to go by numbers, I don't know, since you work so closely, if you were to put a number of percentage of people with disability in our country, what would that be?
Well, so there's
Or
we
overall, I mean, I'm talking about all kinds of disabilities.
yeah, so it's at if I'm not so the census of 2011, now that's 12 years old, and you know how, I mean, we've increased in population way beyond what 2011 levels were. And most experts also felt that that 2.1% that they pegged the figure of people with disabilities at was completely unrealistic. WHO figures, more recent ones, 2017-18, say 7 to 8% of the population.
Wow. That's we talk about India 7 to 8%.
Yes, 7 to 8%.
And even from a purely business perspective, if people were to see, they're actually cutting off that 7 to 8% of
Absolutely,
their
absolutely,
consumers.
absolutely.
If you're not providing them access, and from a humane aspect, it's you're confining them to their rooms.
You look at schools and colleges. I mean, let's not. I'm saying so. People keep talking about the 3 or 4% reservation that the government has, but if you look at the figures of people hired in those quotas, it's never been beyond 1%, and the reason is because the pipeline is doesn't exist, and the pipeline doesn't exist because your schools and colleges are not accessible. Leave that. During pandemic, there was a lot of noise about, oh,
Okay,
you know,
let's review this again. What is it that you're saying? 3 to 4% quotas exist for people with disabilities,
uh, no.
but
So
the
I'm
pipeline is not there because there is no access to schools and colleges.
Yeah, so I'm saying that 4% quota that you have in the government never gets filled.
Yeah. So what's the
It's
point of
never gone.
having a
It's
policy when you
actually
don't have?
never gone beyond one. Maybe, I mean, last I did the mapping, it had never gone beyond 1%. From then to now, it's been 5 6 years since I did that. But from then to now, even if that's gone up, couldn't have gone up beyond 10 2%. No chance at all, because we don't have the pipeline. We don't have most people with disabilities. Okay, look at our villages. Most children with disabilities don't reach school in the first place, because even if they manage to traverse the infrastructure in the villages, the school will not be accessible in itself. Then they have various things on special educators. I mean, I had a discussion with this lady who was the undersecretary of Himachal Pradesh, and she talked about special educators. You need special educators only for intellectual disabilities. What about the rest? The intellectual disability is only 8 to 9% of the total disabled population. What about the rest? You don't need special educators for people with physical disabilities. You don't need special educators for the blind. You don't need special educators for the deaf.
Hearing impaired. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. But what I'm also saying or understanding is that the last mile, of course, is a reflection of whether it has reached our interior most villages or not. But let's at least start with the cities. Let's at least
Exactly.
start with the
The
developed
capital.
places.
We're
If you
sitting in
talk
the
about
capital.
smart cities, now this has to be a very important aspect. It's not just about internet. It's not just about the highways and all of that. This will make a smart city.
Absolutely. I was in Europe 2 years ago, and this was something I hadn't seen. So suddenly I realized that at every red light, there was a sound I heard. And that's when we figured out the sound was for the blind to know that now you can cross the crossing. So if it's a green sign, it stops ticking.
It
And
breaks my heart to see how, I mean, it's purely on the grit and determination of the individual that is actually walking around with that white patlisi stick and trying to cross that road, or somebody may take pity on them and hold their hand and make them cross the road. Why can't we have cities and roads with a simple inclusion like that, which can give them, the confidence to be able to do when they have the drive in them to come out of the house and to be able to do something for themselves, and we are not giving them that access, a simple access to cross the road. I mean, that's the sad part. And I think we're getting there, hopefully, with conversations like these, with policy inclusions, but more than policy inclusions and advocacy for the same, I think it is individual businesses and companies and organizations that can take a view of this inclusion, which includes really everybody, and not merely because you want to tick a tick mark box or a check box. I think that's where the whole change will happen, because we always keep talking about the government doing something or somebody in power doing something and all of that, and not realizing that we are actually throwing away what the power that we have to be able to impact the change, right? From an individual level to an organizational level.
True, and in fact, to the listeners, I'd just make one request. Next time you go out to a restaurant to have lunch with your friends, just imagine exactly what Suparna defines talked about. Imagine you have a friend on a wheelchair, and just look around and see how many restaurants are actually accessible for people on a
Yeah.
wheelchair.
Yeah, and I'm just going to be heading out with my family, my daughter and my mother. We are doing a pre-Mother's Day lunch, and we are going to do just that, because suddenly this image crossed in my mind that we were at this restaurant Margarita in GK2, and we had to climb up the stairs, and I had a knee problem, or I had my knee pain, and it was such a, for me, a task to climb up those stairs, and my old mother who's 81 years old. So here we still have our faculties going. Somebody who is bound to the wheelchair has no, there is no way that one can have accessibility. But everybody keeps saying that the structural design, XYZ, I guess all of us as a society need to come together and try to provide solutions one step at a time. I know things will not change overnight, or the whole thing will not change, but as long as we are conscientious, like how it started with the PVR cinemas. And I'm hoping that other cinemas as well will follow suit with this.
Yeah, so
Thank you
it's not.
so much, Sangeeta.
Yeah,
Is there something that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
yeah, just that it's not been easy. It's still work in progress. I wouldn't say that we've arrived. We are working on it constantly. We're working on removable seats. We're working on seats with movable armrests. So I'm not claiming to have arrived and saying. I'm saying that we are constantly working and constantly trying to raise the bar for ourselves, and we would welcome any kind of feedback. Completely constructive criticism is welcome.
Absolutely, miles to go before I sleep. That's whole
True.
so true, and that's the whole idea behind Sabera as a platform as well, wherein we are highlighting and showcasing the good work that people are doing, irrespective of how big or small the organization is. You can be a Maharatna PSU, you can be a multinational, but you can also be a grassroots level non-profit. You can be an individual trying to effect that change that surrounds you within your own societies, your own communities. That's what the whole spirit of Sabera is. And also, because if something has worked with somebody, I'm sure in another part of the country, and why just the country, in another part of the world, it may also help catalyze that kind of change that is required. The transformation that we are all so desperately looking for, also putting India on the road to development. So, in case as a last, I'm also requesting all of those who joined us today and will be seeing this in the future, share with us the good work that you're doing. All that we're concerned about is that you are making an impact, big or small, as long as you're making an impact as an individual, an organization, or as an entity. We would like to acknowledge your work and showcase it to a larger platform for people to be inspired by it, and in the process catalyze that change that we all are looking for, and putting India on the road to development. Thank you so much,
Thank
Sangeeta, for joining us today. Keep doing the good work that we do, and hopefully we will connect soon as well. And hopefully you'll be there on Sabera this year.
absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining.